Why is it that whenever a new Avatar material drops, Korra gets dragged into the conversation even when she has absolutely nothing to do with it? We've got agenda postings, slander wars, fraud allegations, all types of shit going on in fandom right now. Some people are trolling and I get that, but Korra has been receiving this treatment for over 14 years. This started before half of this terminology even became popular. Hello everyone, this is Supreme Black Kai with another video, and today we're going to be discussing Korra and Aang. People say Korra never listens, she never earns anything. The narrative constantly bails her out. She gets rewarded for failing, she's a Mary Sue, all this shit. Now, I could address every negative claim made about Korra from the internet, but that would turn into a 2-hour video. This video is about one specific double standard. The specific accusations I'm focusing on: Korra receiving under-earned solutions, being bailed out, and being protected by the narrative. All of those apply to Aang as well. In some respects, Aang's version is even worse because of when it happens in his story. Before anybody starts crying, Aang is not a Mary Sue, he is not a bad character. I like Aang. I fuck with him. Avatar: The Last Airbender is still the better overall show. And Korra's book 1 ending is bullshit. That is true. I'm not here to pretend Korra did nothing wrong or that her show is perfect. I'm asking people to apply the same writing standard to both characters. That's it. So, what is the actual issue? Well, it's characters being bailed out. Season 1 Korra got bailed out. But let's establish what being bailed out actually means. A character being rescued by their team is not automatically bad writing. A character making a mistake is not automatically bad writing. Even if somebody eventually saves them for it, it's just not bad writing just because they got saved. A mistake can be excellent writing when it grows naturally from that character. A rescue can also work when the solution was properly established. For example, the person performing it has a believable reason to be there, and the rescue doesn't conveniently erase every consequence. We're talking about Katara saving Aang twice. The first time not being convenient. The spirit water was there. The second time, a little bit more convenient, but that's not the point. A bailout becomes contrived when the story suddenly introduces the exact ability or circumstance needed to escape a problem. Both Aang and Korra receive help constantly. They would both be dead without their friends. Don't call every rescue an asspool simply because you dislike one of them. That's childish. So let's talk about Korra first, okay? Let's get this out of the way. Early Korra, especially in book 1, is extremely difficult to like. She's hot-headed, defensive, prideful, stubborn, and constantly punches first and thinks later. A lot of those criticisms that you guys typically have for her is because of season 1, but that isn't bad writing. That's called having a personality. You know, real people are like that. Human beings are not badly written because they're annoying. That's not how that works. There are people like Korra in the real world. Early Korra, by the way. Korra is also only 17. We treat her like she's grown because she's tall and muscular and looks more mature than Aang, but she's still a teenager who has barely experienced the world. She spent most of her life sheltered inside a compound. She was trained to fight, but she wasn't taught how to function socially or politically. She built this image of what being the Avatar meant in her own head, entered Republic City believing what she had in her own head had her automatically prepared, and the world immediately beat that idea out of her. So yes, her personality makes perfect sense. That doesn't mean everybody has to enjoy watching her during book 1. Her early losses also make sense. She encounters an unfamiliar style and equalist chi blockers, gets her ass beat, adapts, and performs much better against them later. Usually, that's exactly the type of failure and improvement audiences claim they want. But for Korra, she doesn't get that type of love. Now, the real issue with the writing, not the character personality, which is not a writing issue like so many people say, the real problem with the finality and the writing is Amon removes Korra's water bending, earth bending, and fire bending, the only bending that she's capable of at this point. Then at the exact moment Mako needs her, she suddenly unlocks airbending. You can construct a thematic explanation for that. Sure, there is some details in the show that goes towards being able to construct, but Korra's identity was completely attached to her physical bending ability. Once Amon stripped most of that identity away, the element she could never fully access finally emerged. The idea can work. The problem is that the show doesn't develop it enough, and it happens at the exact second that she needs it. She uses this newly unlocked airbending to launch Amon out of a window. He falls into the water, panics, and publicly exposes himself as a waterbender. His movement collapses, even though that shouldn't have happened. Tarlok then silently kills himself and Amon, ending their entire family tragedy within the final minutes. After that, Korra reaches her lowest point. Aang appears, restores her bending, and she immediately gains access to the Avatar. She then restores Lin's bending, and the romantic conflict with Mako is also resolved. Everything gets wrapped up in a nice little bow tie. That is far too much resolution for one ending, and it's rushed and under-earned. Book 1 was originally conceived as a self-contained miniseries, so I understand why they believe they needed a complete ending. That explains the decision. It does not make the execution good. You could defend Korra without defending this finale. It is easily one of the weakest endings in the franchise, but here's the difference. That treatment does not become the pattern for Korra's entire story. So after book 1, Korra continues to receive help from her friends, but that help stops magically resetting her to normal, like season 1's ending. In book 2, Unalaq and Batu sever her connection to the past avatars. That connection remains gone through the end of her series. Nobody arrives afterwards to restore it. Korra then deliberately leaves the spirit portals open. Whether you believe that was a correct choice or not, the world doesn't return to its previous condition. Ever. We know that based off of the new series. Humans and spirits now have to live with a permanently transformed reality. And yes, Janora's intervention during the finale is underexplained. Korra critics are completely entitled to criticize that, but Janora does help her locate Rava. She does not restore the past avatars or erase what happened. In book 3, the Red Lotus poisons Korra. The Air Nation saves her life, and Suyin extracts most of the poison, but Korra does not walk away from that battle normal. She actually doesn't walk away at all. She ends the season in a wheelchair. Then we skip forward 3 years, and during that time, Katara helps rehabilitate her body. She can walk. Toph identifies the residual poison, and Korra eventually removes the remaining metal herself, but still, she has that trauma. So it's stuck to even later. And Zahir later helps her overcome the spiritual block, preventing her from entering the spirit world, helping her get rid of that trauma. Even in the show, she states that she'll probably never be the same, but that's the point. Korra receives help throughout the entire process of the show, and I'm not taking that away from anybody who claims that she gets helped. The distinction is that none of them can press a magical reset button. They keep her alive, guide her, and give her tools, but Korra still has to confront the trauma herself. She is effectively absent as the world's functioning avatar for 3 years. During that vacuum, the Earth Kingdom crisis worsens and Kuvira consolidates power. Korra did not create Kuvira, but her inability to return is one condition shaping the world she eventually comes back to. All these are major consequences, and when Korra returns prematurely, Kuvira humiliates her because she isn't ready. Korra is repeatedly stripped down and forced to rebuild herself. She is fundamentally transformed without becoming a completely different person. Her confidence becomes tempered by empathy, experience, and the knowledge that she cannot punch every problem into submission. Book 1's bailout happens at the beginning of her completed arc. It ruins the possibility of an airbending only recovery story, but it does not ruin Korra's entire character. Personally, I didn't need to watch another avatar slowly regain all 4 elements anyway. We already watched Aang travel around the world and learning them. Korra begins as a naturally talented fighter, so the world has to break her in a completely different way. By book 4, Korra finally becomes the avatar she thought she already was during book 1. Okay, so all of that to say is that all the consequences that she had shaped her, formed her, it molded her to be the avatar. You can't do that if the consequences are dealt with immediately, like it was in book 1. Now let's talk about Aang. Now I want to be fair. Aang faces real consequences. He suffers, he fails, trains, and he earns plenty of what he accomplishes. Running away leaves him carrying enormous grief surrounding the Air Nomad genocide. The Fire Nation is responsible for that genocide, not a 12-year-old child. But Aang still carries that guilt. When Aang burns Katara, the physical injury is healed quickly, but the emotional consequence lasts for most of the show. He becomes terrified of firebending until the dragons help him understand that fire can represent life and energy instead of destruction. That's great writing. Leaving the guru Aang to attempt his final spiritual breakthrough during an active battle. He successfully releases his attachment to Katara and opens the chakra, but Azula strikes him with lightning at his most vulnerable state. Katara then saves him with spirit water, and that is not an ass pull. That water was established beforehand. Katara carried it for a long time and nearly used it earlier. Saving Aang consumes it. Ba Sing Se still falls, Aang retains the scar, and his access to the Avatar state becomes physically blocked. Again, great writing. I wouldn't pretend otherwise just because I'm defending Korra. Aang's arc works throughout most of the series. My problem is its final resolution. So Aang's final dilemma, alright? His story begins with him running away from being the Avatar. To me, his ending should represent him completely accepting that responsibility. His final problem isn't purely whether he could physically fight Ozai. We know he always could. His deeper conflict is whether he can fulfill his duty without violating his belief against taking life. That belief is genuinely rooted in air nomad culture. I'm not denying that, but Aang applies it more absolutely than any other airbender that we're shown. Gyatso's remains are surrounded by Fire Nation corpses. That leaves very little ambiguity that his final defense was lethal. Avatar Yang Chen also tells Aang that an ordinary air nomad can pursue spiritual detachment, but the Avatar cannot detach from the world. The Avatar's duty may require sacrificing personal spiritual needs for everybody else. After consulting the past Avatars, Aang actually believes that he may have to kill Ozai. My preferred ending would have been tragically beautiful. The boy who once ran from his responsibility finally places that responsibility above everything else, and he saves the world but loses part of the innocence or identity that he desperately wanted to preserve. That would have completed the running away theme for me. And I'm not mad that they didn't go with that, I'm just mad with how they executed it. Killing Ozai was not the only possible good ending. Aang defeating him non-lethally fits his established character perfectly. Again, I'm not mad that they went about it the way they did. He didn't necessarily need to kill Ozai, he needed to earn not killing Ozai. And that's where the lion turtle comes in. Lion turtles appearing in the earlier artwork establishes that the creatures exist. It does not properly establish energy bending, a lion turtle granting that ability, or energy bending being capable of removing another person's bending in general. It doesn't establish any of that. The lion turtle arrives as Aang desperately needs a third option and gives him the exact answer to his moral dilemma. Now Aang earns the execution of that ability, okay? When he is taking the bending away, his own energy is nearly overwhelmed. His spirit has to remain unbendable, or he will be corrupted and destroyed. That part requires courage and willpower, but Aang does not discover or develop the solution himself. The narrative hands him access immediately before the final battle. The story saves Aang, not from being killed, but from being anything other than Aang. He fulfills his duty, he defeats Ozai, refuses to kill, preserves his air nomad identity more than any other air nomad, by the way, and proves that his preferred answer was correct. The ending doesn't contradict his character, it protects his character so completely that he never has to surrender anything. That is not even character assassination, to be honest. It's almost the opposite. The writing protects him from the sacrifice his arc appeared to be building toward. Now, I can't prove that Nickelodeon explicitly prohibited the creators from killing Ozai, but a child hero deliberately killing somebody was probably never a realistic conclusion for a Nickelodeon family series. That explains why they wanted a non-lethal destination. It does not explain why they failed to establish the road leading there. And we're still not even finished. That's just the lion turtle and how that robbed him of his character arc. Because Aang receives a second perfectly timed solution during the fight itself. And we all know what I'm talking about. The Rock! No, not him. Aang earned access to the Avatar state in Ba Sing Se. Azula's lightning created a physical blockage, so the idea that a physical impact could remove it has an internal explanation. But come on, Ozai blasts Aang directly into a conveniently shaped rock. It doesn't strike above the scar, below it, to the left or to the right, or to diagonally. It strikes the exact place Azula's lightning struck him at the exact moment Ozai is about to finish him. That impact restores his access to the Avatar state. Aang enters it and completely overwhelms Ozai because Ozai was never going to compete with a fully activated Avatar state. The finale therefore gives Aang two separate solutions that he does not earn. He didn't earn that shit, okay? The lion turtle resolves his moral problem, and the rock resolves his physical problem. Aang earned the Avatar state originally, and he earns the execution of energy bending. I will give him that. What he does not earn is the perfectly timed restoration or the sudden arrival of the exact moral alternative he needed. Now compare that with Korra. Korra loses most of her bending and receives the exact restoration necessary to complete what was supposed to be her final episode. Aang loses access to the Avatar state and receives the exact physical impact necessary to restore it. Korra cannot solve what Amon did to her, so Aang provides the solution. Aang cannot solve his moral dilemma, so the Lion Turtle provides the solution. Both finales activate or introduce answers precisely when the protagonist needs them. Korra fans have to admit that her book 1 ending is rushed and protected by convenience. Aang fans should have to admit the same thing about his ending. The difference and the reason why one is worse than the other is the placement. Korra's bailout happens at the beginning of her story. The show then receives 3 more books in which the narrative dismantles her security and forces her to rebuild. Aang's bailout happens at the end of his story. That is the final resolution of the title protagonist. There is no later season requiring him to interrogate the solution or pay another price. If Korra's book 1 ending had happened at the end of book 4, I would be calling it garbage just like everybody else. I'm not giving Korra a pass. I'm applying the same exact standard that I've been talking about the entire video. And after all of that, right? Because if we are to just go off of what people say, we all hear that Korra is a Mary Sue based off of the accusations that I've hopefully debunked at this point today. But after all of that, I'm not going to sit here and call Aang a Mary Sue, okay? Because he does struggle. He fails often. He trains, he depends upon his friends, and he remains imperfect all the way until the end of the show. He also hasn't completely mastered every element by the finale either. So he's not a physical Mary Sue either. But his ending gives him the exact type of narrative protection people cite when accusing Korra of being. His Avatar state is restored, Ozai is defeated, his morality is preserved, the war ends, his relationship with Katara is secured. Remember, I just went through all those little details for a perfect ending. He receives the perfect ending, right? Just like how season 1 or book 1 for Korra was the perfect ending. Everything was magically resolved. That's real narrative protection, and it happened at Aang's ending, not his beginning. Doesn't make him a Mary Sue though, because we saw all the struggles leading up to. Korra's not a Mary Sue either. Her story repeatedly dismantles her physically, spiritually, and psychologically, especially psychologically, and politically even. Even her final victory is collective. Her friends help destroy Kavir's weapon, and Korra's personal triumph comes from choosing understanding over domination. She ends her series more mature, but the world isn't magically perfect. So no, this isn't an Aang hate video. I'm a fan of Aang, like I said, and The Last Airbender remains the stronger overall show. Just Aang is not the stronger overall character because of how his story ended. I'm also not asking anybody to suddenly like Korra. Book 1 Korra can be unpleasant, her book 1 finale is badly rushed, and The Legend of Korra has obvious structural problems. I'm just asking for consistency. Don't take Korra's single rushed ending and then project it across all 4 books, and then pretend Aang's finale is above the same criticism because nostalgia has protected him. Korra's story begins by protecting her, and then spends 3 books destroying that protection. Aang's story ends by protecting him at the moment his greatest sacrifice is finally demanded. The events I described happened in both shows. You can disagree with my interpretation, but you cannot pretend that Lion Turtle and the Rock weren't the exact solutions Aang needed at the exact moments that he needed. Disagree in the comments if you want, roast me if you want. I'm standing 10 toes down. If you like the video or want to see more content, like, share, and subscribe. This is Supreme Black Kai, and I'm out.